You're listening to A Strange Arrangement.
So lately, the music I've been listening to has a lot of technical guitar playing. It's called fingerstyle playing, where the player usually will pluck the strings with their fingers instead of a pick, though not always. And there's a lot of music genres that use this method of guitar playing. You've got classical, folk, flamenco, jazz. But lately, my preferred method of intake has been prog rock. There's this whole community, this whole scene of instrumental rock music built on these insane guitar riffs backed by jazzy chords and odd meters, showcasing these truly accomplished guitar players like Yvette Young, Ichika Nito, Manuel Gardner Fernandez, and Tosin Abasi. And I'm just blown away by it every time. I have trouble wrapping my head around it. It's a flurry of fingers that I can barely follow, but it sounds amazing. I eat this music up. I love it. It's one thing to say, hey, look at all the cool things I can do with my guitar. And another thing to throw it into a song and make it sound amazing. So I've been hoping to get a fingerstyle guitar player on the podcast for quite some time. I think fingerstyle guitar covers are an excellent example of overcoming numerous constraints and challenges in music arranging, boiling down all the parts of a song so that one person can play a full arrangement of it using one instrument. And so I thought, who could I ask to come onto my little show and talk about this stuff? Who is a great guitar player and musician and who would make an arrangement for the show? And as it turns out, I have an old college buddy who does exactly this thing. This is the sound of my friend, Ray McGale. He plays a lot of fingerstyle guitar covers, most of which he's arranged himself. And he regularly plays these songs at shows around his home in Long Island. The most impressive shows being what he calls power hours, where he cycles through a new song every minute for an hour. Which, first of all, I don't know if you've tried to play guitar for an hour straight with no breaks, but it's impossible. My fingers hurt just thinking about it. I played a 45-minute show with breaks between songs a few days ago, and my fingers still hurt. So, just a testament to how badass my friend Ray is. Anyway, Ray is an incredible talent. The hardest part was just deciding which cover he was going to choose. We ended up going with the old folk song, Danny Boy. Yeah, that's the one. So let's find out. This is Ray McGale on this episode of A Strange Arrangement.
Hey, I am Ray McGale. I'm a fingerstyle guitarist living in Astoria, Queens, near New York City.
How would you describe the fingerstyle guitar to maybe someone who either doesn't know what it is or like sees it and goes, "What on earth is going on?" There's so much information being thrown at me.
I think it pretty much comes down to like a study and counterpoint. It's similar to when someone is playing piano and instrumental piano music, where they're able to do some rhythm with the left hand, some leads with the right, and put a whole song and melody together. But on the guitar, you're limited to just the six strings, and you're pretty much just your left hand and what you could pluck with your right hand. So the challenge is trying to figure out how to bring as much of the melody out of it without sacrificing any of the rhythmic, the chord progression, bass line, anything like that. So there's usually quite a few things going on at the same time, but always at the very least a melody happening over some bass notes. And I'm typically playing a bit of bass or rhythm with my thumb on my right hand, and pulling the leads and the melodies out with the rest of my fingers, all typically while holding down chords that there's also some resonating, like just sounds a bit fuller and stuff like that. But yeah, at the end of the day, just a melody being played over a bass line for the most part. The most simplified version of that, I would say. I originally did this arrangement for a St. Patty's Day show that I was playing. I was like thinking of potential like Irishy songs that I could pepper into the set. And but that was the initial reason I started working with the melody, was because I had a St. Patty's Day show coming up. And as the arrangement started to come together, like I knew I was going to be playing it for people in a specific venue and stuff like that, and I can kind of like envision the where it was being played and how it was being played and stuff like that, who would be receiving it, and catered some of it to that. And it's definitely grown and ebbed and flowed over the years as I've treated it more as an individual composition than a part of a set list. But that kind of determined a lot of the initial pass at it. So there's pretty much just an A and a B part, and those just loop over and over again. I probably should, but I admittedly don't know how many verses there are in the original Danny Boy. But I just kind of kept looping it on my end and just taking them into different interpretations until I kind of just got bored and ended the the arrangement. But I started in a very simple way with the original melody of the song, playing it in like a mid register and pretty much just doing melody over chords. And then from there, I just kind of zhuzhed it up a little bit by adding some fills in between, just like a slightly more in-depth version. And then from there, just got wacky with it, some harmonics, some percussion, and stuff like that. This song was almost just a case study in just like different techniques that I just have in my bag of tricks, like the harmonic stuff, the little fills, the percussion and stuff. Those are all things that I have the ability to pull out and use in songs and arrangements when necessary. But in this one, because it's just a lot of repetition, it's almost like a blank slate in terms of approach. It kind of turned into, well, let me just do all of it over the course of it. And the arrangement came together over the course of working different parts like that. And yeah, once I realized that it was going to be this structure and I'm doing this here and I'm doing this here, I was like, well, if I'm doing these techniques, let's just see how many different wacky things I can like pepper in here. What a harmonic is, at least in the context of a guitar, is at certain intervals up and down the neck. I don't understand why this happens, but if you just kind of float your finger over the actual physical fret instead of pressing down, it creates a higher pitch. And you can do the key there is the intervals. Like typically it's the fifth fret, the seventh fret, and the 12th fret. But say if you wanted to do one on the 13th fret rather than the 12th, you can fret the first fret, thus creating an interval of 12 frets in between, and then harmonic it with one finger. Like instead of floating with your left hand and plucking with your right, you can float with your like index finger and pluck with your thumb. It's much harder to do, but it does open up a lot of like a ton more capability, because like you're no longer limited to just the natural ones. I will say natural ones sound much better, so I try and use those as much as possible, and they're way easier to do. But if you need a certain note in a melody line that doesn't exist in natural harmonics, you can create an artificial one. So I think there are a few artificial ones in the Danny Boy harmonic section, but I try to stick with the naturals as much as I can, just because they resonate better too. I either started with the main melody and then realized that I could play it with harmonics and then jump to the harmonic section, and the rest of the arrangement kind of fell in around those two parts. Or it might have just started as a study in harmonics, if I can like pull this melody out of just harmonics. And after I figured out that part, was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Let me try and do just a whole arrangement around it. And then I guess as it developed and I kind of realized the structure, like, okay, we're going to start pretty simple and then maybe jazz it up a little bit, and then kind of take a step back, I guess, in terms of the harmonic section, in terms of just like intensity. And then at that point, it made sense to go more intense. So then I started doing the percussive stuff. So the flow of it, think, if I'm remembering correctly, kind of like wrote itself a little bit just based on having that one harmonic section in the middle, and then knowing I want to start relatively simple and just kind of filled it in from there. When I was recording it, because I've played this live a few times, and there are parts that are locked in, and there are parts that are will kind of just ebb and flow based on how I'm feeling when I actually play it live. And yeah, some of the improvisations in that one were done the day of, and probably haven't done since. So like the wacky little fill, in like the second time through. That was a weird little improv thing that I usually do something much less complicated than that. But the time something the spirit or the whiskey moved me, and yeah, busted that look out. And like when we were listening to it through just now, I was like, oh yeah, that part. Oh, cool. Like, all right. And also the percussive stuff in my mind when I'm playing that part, I'm thinking of like Celtic drums, like very like the same way that I once read a piece on Tenacious D where before they started playing with a band, people were like, you could see that when playing these songs on two acoustic guitars, that in their minds they're hearing it with like a whole band around them, and that's what gives them the intensity and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I approach a lot of my arrangements, and that part in particular, like I envision like a whole like a drum line behind it and stuff like that, and the little percussive stuff on the body of the guitar is just trying to channel like a little bit of that energy into that part, to try and make it big and epic, even though it's just coming out of one single guitar, I would say. A lot of the fingerstyle guys out there will do crazy percussive stuff, and they're probably coming from a similar camp, but I'll treat it almost like I'm playing like a djembe or something like that, where I'm instead of just slapping the guitar, I'm using my fingers to get different tones, and be able to play like quicker rhythms and stuff like that. I'll do a lot of just kind of like letting the fingers fall one by one to create almost like a drum roll effect. I can almost picture different parts of the body of the guitar as like different parts of a drum set. Like if I were to hit the main part of the body with like say the heel of my hand, that creates like an area kind of bass drum effect. But if I slap the sides with my fingers, that's like almost like a snare. And I have arrangements that are even more percussive driven than this one, where I'm doing a lot of like back and forth between like creating a drum beat and then going to doing the more melody oriented stuff. But this one just worked out so well that there's enough space within the melody that like the drum cadence fits in so well in between, that it just seemed like an obvious choice to kind of create that almost like 80s drum fill, kind of just like big hits instead of something a bit more complicated.
You've got all these different tricks of the trade that you could throw in there when you're playing this, but what are some of the most important things to come across when you're performing a song like this?
I would say making sure the melody is as distinct as possible. Um, there are arrangements I've done where I kind of got so into the arranging process that I didn't notice certain things about it. Like I just a bit too in my own world, and I realized that like, oh, this isn't as recognizable as it was in my head, or the part of the song that I'm kind of focusing on here is not the part that people typically think of, or like would remind the song. So I would say a big thing in this is just to have it be pretty immediately recognizable. And then once people know what they're listening to, because again, without vocals on top of it, you're just relying on the guitar to convey that melody, and that's pretty much the main identifier there. And then once people know what they're listening to, then you can kind of like zhuzh it up a little bit and do the fancy stuff, do the harmonics and that kind of thing. But I always like to start simple and then move from there, but always I try and keep it melody above all else in terms of, again, going back to the, I guess, to the live thing, making sure people just know what they're listening to. I would say it's almost a 50-50 mix between having like a very clear vision in my mind in terms of like how to approach each section, and other times just kind of just relying on my own tendencies and stuff like that. Like a lot of the fills in the second time through the melody are primarily improvised. And I think it's just my own tendencies when I'm throwing in fills and stuff like that to go a bit in like the like bluesier, or like I think both country and blues is kind of like where I'll wind up if I'm just kind of doing my own thing, depending on circumstance. But those kind of work their way in there as a result of just my own playing like tendencies, I guess would be the right word there. But then like later in the song where it kind of builds and stuff like that, I wanted to keep it like a bit more of a grandiose thing, kind of trying to part as much from the beginning section as I could. In the big scheme of things, I would say it's less that there is a vision, but more so that there's like a general feeling that I want to convey with that sort of stuff.
And now here's the whole arrangement. Thanks again, Ray. Pleasure as always. Now tell the folks where they can find you.
I would say I'm probably most active on Instagram, which is my handle is Ray McGale, McGale, acoustic. I also have a YouTube channel of the same name, although I haven't posted in a little bit. I gotta pick up the slack on that. And yeah, those are probably my main two ways of getting stuff out into the world these days. Yeah, Facebook is dead.
A Strange Arrangement was produced by me, Rob McCarthy. I edit and mix the show, and I wrote our theme music. Our artwork was done by Daniel Joel Newman, and you can find more of his work at danieljoelnewman.com. Special thanks to Elizabeth Stahl for notes and for that voice that you hear at the beginning of the show. And be sure to check out our website, asamusicpodcast.com, for sheet music, artist bios, and ways that you can get in touch with us.